Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the PsyChi 2022 webinar series. Our series this year is sponsored by APA Style. My name is Cynthia Wilson. I am the Director of Membership and Development for PsyChi. And I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Jason Young. Dr. Young is a professor of social psychology in the Department of Psychology at Hunter College, CUNY, where he conducts research on the impact of emotion on judgment and decision-making, including factors affecting fear of crime and the impact of math anxiety on personal spending and saving habits. He is a fellow of Division I of APA and a long-standing advocate for more in-depth student advising strategies to help promote their research and career goals. So I think everyone's muted now. I'll ask you to stay muted and utilize the chat feature for any questions that you have today, and help me welcome Dr. Jason Young.
Terrific. Well, thank you all very much. Clearly, I'm a little bit technologically challenged today, but we're going to make the best of this. And yes, I'm going to go through a number of steps that are recommended for you to consider as you think about your psychology training. And one of the key things that I want you to think about, and the reason why the title of my talk is called The Skills You Know, Recognizing Your Psychology Skills as Valuable Tools for the Job Market, is that we professors spend so much time teaching you about the substance of psychology, but we don't always do a great job of teaching you how to communicate those skills to non-psychology people. And that includes potential employers that you may be working with. But this could apply also to even grad programs or professional programs. And so today I'm going to walk you through, basically it was a project that I was a part of, where we looked at different types of skills that employers look for and map those onto the type of psychology training that you are already receiving. Now, this is a webinar. I don't want it to be a lecture. So if you have questions at any point, just type them into the chat. I'm going to assume they will rise to the top because I can see the top of the chat field. And I will be happy to pause and answer your questions. And please don't be shy. Let's make this work for you. Kevin, if you could move to the next slide. The project that I worked on was actually something that was sponsored by the American Psychological Association. And it had goals of trying to identify the skills that are valued by employers and how those skills, as I said before, map onto what you're already learning in the psychology curriculum. Now, I need to emphasize that the purpose of this project was not to simply make you a good employee widget to be plugged into some job, but rather for you to recognize that what you're gaining in your psychology major already incorporates a lot of the skills that employers are looking for, only they use very different language from the way that we think about it in our psychology courses. So part of what our group was, this working group was focusing on, was doing kind of a survey of the employment field to get an idea across a diverse range of jobs, what types of skills they tend to look for. But in addition to that, looking at how they framed those skills, what wordings they used in their job listings. So we actually looked at, the types of job postings that are out there and how they describe what they're looking for. The people that I work with, Kevin, if you could go to the next slide, was a group of faculty from across the country. And all of these were people who are very dedicated to the teaching of psychology. Maybe you recognize some of the names on this list. If not, you will if you go to conferences, because all of them are very active in talking about the very type of thing that I'm presenting today. But basically, we worked together for more than 2 years to try to pull together what these skills are and how we can reframe them and how we can teach students, and for that matter, faculty, how to reframe them when you're presenting to the world who you are, what you know, and what you have to offer. So Kevin, if you can go to the next slide. So we're going to basically be covering what we consider essential workforce skills okay, the things that people are looking for psychology majors. And yes, the next slide, basically we put together the skills. And actually, let me hold up for 1 second and emphasize that along with the invitation that you got for this webinar, there was a link to a handout that you can get for free, download from the APA website. It looks kind of like this. I know it's probably a very grainy image, but it's a one-page handout. There's a second page that has some references on it. If you have that available, that will help you through this talk. You can just jot your notes on it. But even if you don't have it available, you can download it later so that you can sort of summarize a lot of the things that I'm going to be covering. But among the first things that's most important on this handout are a number of skill domains. These are kind of like super domains of skills, skill sets that we found that employers are looking for. And I'm going to go through the 5 general domains, and then within each of those domains, there were specific skills that are in the language that we took from these job postings. So the 5 domains, excuse me, to begin with what we call the cognitive domain. And the cognitive domain, plain and simply, is how we think and reason, both in our everyday lives, but especially on the job. And so within the cognitive domain, there are a number of skills I'll go into, but basically, this is just the general thing that you learn in all of your psychology courses about our styles of thinking and the types of reasoning and information management and logic systems that we use. In addition to that, we also looked at a number of social factors, social skills. And these are things that especially employers feel, and in fact have mentioned in numerous interviews, that they do not feel students often are as well prepared in. So these are going to be especially important to discuss because there are opportunities that you can get in your psychology training, but some of these are not always ones that get the degree of emphasis they need. And plain and simply, when I talk about social skills, we're talking about how you relate to other people, which in any job you're going to be doing. The third category is personal related skills. And these are skills related to how you conduct yourself. And this relates to the things that you think about yourself, the various habits that you have, and again, kind of the styles of work that you have. Now, these first 3 domains that I've talked about, these are all what I would consider to be sort of part of the traditional psychology core of ideas that you learn in your courses. The other 2 domains I would suggest you think about in terms of being tools. These are tools that, while you're not specifically taught them in psychology, you do have to learn how to use them effectively in order to not only do well in your psych classes, but also to apply your psychology knowledge in various situations. The first of these 2 tool domains is communication. And plain and simply, communication deals with written communication, how well you can write and write clearly, and oral communication, how well you can speak and present clearly. And the other is technology. And the idea behind technology is that, of course, the use of computers, of hardware and software is becoming increasingly important. And as you go forward, both in your psychology research, but also in the types of jobs and graduate programs you're going towards, they are going to be concerned and they are going to be interested in what technological skills you have. Okay, so Kevin, if you can go to the next slide. What I want to do now is simply, okay, this is the entire handout. And so this is a sample of what you hopefully are able to download. And if you go to the next slide, Kevin, this is actually the website, which I believe is the same website that, yes, that you saw in the invitation and that is being provided to you. So if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, so now I want to just sort of break down each of those 5 domains that I just talked about. And here we unpack them again through scouring the various employer job postings and using the language that we saw. So how would they specifically describe what they were looking for. So among these things include analytical thinking. So analytical thinking, plain and simply, is complex problem solving. How well can you be provided with a situation, okay, some type of dilemma, and come up with a workable solution? All right, and in many jobs, especially the degree to which you're given autonomy is going to be dependent on your ability to solve problems on your own. And this is all about analytical thinking. Closely related to that is critical thinking. Critical sounds like it should be almost the same thing, except with critical thinking, what a lot of employers are referring to is certain types of decision rules that are used in different environments to make problem solving more workable. And so an example of this with critical thinking is the use of statistics or the use of certain problem solving rules that a particular line of employment might be using. And I'll give you one example from a former student of mine. She's now interested in advertising for movies. She actually does work in Hollywood. She took her psychology skills. She was always very interested in media, and she ended up doing marketing and advertising for movies. And one of the things she's had to learn how to do, one of the decision rules that she's had to learn how to do, is how to take any given movie that she's provided and to immediately try to think of the type of genre, the type of category, like is it a drama, is it a thriller, is it a mystery, and to map it onto prior movies that may be somewhat similar, and to look at the trajectory, the pattern of how they marketed that previous movie, how successful it was, what tinkering, what changes they might need to make, have had to make in that previous movie, and to apply it to this current film that she's trying to market. And so there is actually a set of steps, a set of decision rules, and that's what the critical thinking is about. Creativity is exactly what it sounds like. That's innovation. Okay? To what extent can you think in different ways to solve a problem? And in fact, recently I saw a poster I thought was very clever. We often hear the phrase that's getting a little tired that says, think outside the box. But what the poster said is, rather than thinking outside the box, just toss the box out and think differently. But basically with creativity, how can you essentially break set and think about something in a completely different way? Maybe applying a different field to what you're doing in a way that's never been done before. Information management deals with how you can organize information. This is something, especially as a psychology student, you become very well adept at, especially when you do research, because so much of what you're doing is trying to organize data, organize information. Even when you're putting together a research paper, you're trying to do so in a very rational, logical way. So information management is all about that. And then the final cognitive skill that we saw mentioned in employment listings is judgment and decision-making. And the issue with judgment and decision-making often deals with logic on the one hand, okay? But it also deals with, and this is something psychologists are especially specialists about, so never sell yourself short. But with judgment and decision-making, often what we're thinking about are what are some of the potential biases, some of the potential thinking risks, some of the cognitive heuristics, the cognitive shortcuts that we sometimes take that may influence the way we make decisions, and most importantly, perhaps might lead us to not make good decisions. So employers want to know what experience you have, both in the classroom, what have you learned, but also how have you applied it, okay? And that application could be in an internship that you've done or in some type of research. And we're going to talk later about where you'll size up your own personal experiences with each of these types of categories. So those are the 5 specific skills associated with the cognitive domain. Kevin, if you could go to the next slide. The next domain that's listed on the handout. So here I'm going alphabetically rather than the way I did in that earlier slide. So here they mentioned communication skills. And as I said before, communication is something that employers think is again, for many people who apply for jobs, they feel is not well developed enough. And what they pay particular attention to are two things. One is written communication, how well you can clearly write. These are all those papers you're writing. But the other critical thing is oral communication. To what extent can you speak clearly? Can you organize a presentation and make it understandable to a wide range of expertise that people may have in the audience? And so both of these, in fact, we saw regularly emphasized, some more than others. Certain types of jobs, they know that the communication you're going to be doing is all going to be spoken. There'll be very little writing. Others are maybe completely the opposite. But this sort of has to be included in any list of skills that you're developing, because it is something that is getting emphasis in a lot of jobs. Okay, next slide, Kevin. Personal skills deals with you. What are the characteristics of yourself that you have developed, that you've cultivated, and maybe that you've modified through your education as well as other life growth, that employers care about because it will affect how effective you can be working in their particular positions. And the three specific skills that we saw employers emphasize is, first, adaptability. Plain and simply, they want to know, are you going to arrive at the job being able to hit the ground running and pick up whatever needs to be done relatively swiftly? Or is it the case that someone might need a lot of extensive training? And of course, they're going to prefer people who are adaptable. And what they really mean by adaptable is being able to pick things up relatively quickly. So for any particular type of job, they are going to care about how well you can sort of respond to whatever the demands of the job are. And the other thing about adaptability is it's not just that there's one environment a job may require you to adapt to, but maybe the job itself requires tremendous flexibility. So the question is, and something for you to ask yourself, as well as how you present yourself when you apply for jobs, as well as graduate programs, is how well can you adapt to changes in the workplace as well. Integrity is another personal quality that we saw repeatedly emphasized, because basically one of the things that they're very much interested in is reliability, honesty, accountability, the degree to which someone knows how to monitor themselves and actually maintain a certain degree of productivity and to follow through on things that need to be done in the workplace. And then a final personal skill that we saw often mentioned by employers is self-regulation. And self-regulation is kind of a psychological term, but effectively it's the degree to which you can manage your time, okay, and manage the way that you conduct various projects and sort of monitor yourself carefully enough that you are following through to the letter whatever is requested of you. But basically, it's also something that they found in a number of cases that they want to see that people are showing initiative, all right, where it's appropriate. All right, so self-regulation, it kind of follows from adaptability and integrity to the degree that you can make sure that you are regularly coming through and doing things in a way that measures the pace of whatever is demanded by the workplace environment. Okay, so managing your time especially is something that as a student, you need to focus on, and that becomes particularly important when you're conducting research and even when you're doing an internship, like a clinical internship. Self-regulation is very important because it's making sure you are where you need to be at the right time in terms of both physically, but also in terms of the amount of work that's been accomplished. Okay, Kevin, next slide. Social skills, these are the ones, this is where psychologists should rock. This is where you really, certainly in class, you're learning a great deal about how people interact with each other. But where we saw that employers particularly wanted emphasis and the things that they're looking for, and not so incidentally, this is one of the areas where employers most often complain that people applying for jobs are not fully developed, or have not had enough experience, at least well-developed experience, in working with others, beginning with collaboration skills. It's great that you might look good on paper about your own personal qualities, but how well can you apply the qualities that you have, the skills that you have, in working with others? So collaboration, because many jobs require teamwork. Okay? Even if you're not part of a set team, there are other people you're going to be bouncing ideas off of, or relating resources, sharing resources with. Collaboration is all about the degree to which you can easily, okay, work with others and share responsibilities with others. Diversity, okay, or what we put on the handout as inclusivity, is also important, because it's kind of a given you're going to be in a workplace with people from different backgrounds, and the assumption is that should not be an issue in terms of holding you back. And if anything, it should be something that you can take advantage of, all right, and use to productive purposes. And so when we talk about diversity, it's not only the respect for diversity, but it's really making use of it, treating it as a resource, and recognizing distinct abilities that different people may have, and maximizing your ability to work with folks who have different backgrounds, okay? Background not just being a demographic background, but ability and knowledge background as well. Leadership skills. This is one of the areas where people really, it's sort of hit or miss in college, how much experience you actually get to be a leader. Some people seek out leadership skills through extracurricular activities, getting involved in student government, getting involved in clubs, ones where you play a specific role in managing or controlling the direction of a project or a group. And then there are class opportunities that sometimes occur, where perhaps there might be an assignment where you're working in a team, perhaps on a research project, and maybe informally one person emerges as the leader, the coordinator, the one who's reminding folks what needs to be done when. These are the types of leadership skills that employers absolutely do look for. But again, this is one of those things that's very hit or miss. And I guess the watchword here is, since we're talking about it, is that this may be something, if you still have time in college, to try to maximize opportunities that you might take with an eye towards cultivating these leadership skills. Along with leadership, of course, there's management skills. And leadership is where you kind of provide the heading of a project. Management skills is really the more hands-on management of individuals. Leadership's where you tell people they should go. Management is the actual day-to-day. How do you work with people? How do you manage individuals so that you can maximize who is doing what project? If someone's having a challenge, and everyone has challenges at some point or another, how good are you at assisting others in dealing with these challenges? That's often what management boils down to. And then finally, service orientation. This essentially deals with whenever we talk about people being a people person. Service orientation refers to the degree to which you show a certain degree of empathy, a certain degree of enthusiasm, of patience, of all the things that help make a interaction go smoothly when you're working with someone. And this is something that goes quadruply, not just double, but quadruply when you're in a professional setting. You know what that feels like whenever you've been in a situation working with a cashier, a pharmacist, a doctor, someone who's providing a service to you. And some folks simply don't have those people skills. You find them abrupt. You find they're not speaking clearly. They don't seem to care what the reaction is, whether what they're saying is coming through to you clearly. That's what service orientation is. And you better believe that employers do care about that as well. Finally, Kevin, if you could go to the next slide. The final domain is technology and the technological skills. This is the one that I was so challenged today in working with GoToMeetings. But basically, technological skills increasingly, while this is not unique to psychology at all, it is something that is very much integrated in the types of experiences you're having in psychology, in that a couple of things that employers are concerned with. One is this, once again, this flexibility or adaptability. You kind of saw that with personal qualities and thinking styles, cognitive qualities as well, but technologically, how well can you adapt to new systems? I'm very familiar with Zoom, but somehow I couldn't make it adapt to GoToMeeting, but I'll have to learn that. When you get a job, they're going to look at the degree to which you can adapt with new technologies. Okay, this could be something as simple as, well, our Microsoft Word program's not working. We have a different word processing program. How well can you adapt to that? Okay, so flexibility to the systems that they have. But in addition, plain and simply, there's the hardware and software skills. You know, everyone will talk about how well I know Excel, I know PowerPoint, I know Microsoft Word, I know SPSS. Those are software skills. There may be some jobs where they're looking for hardware skills as well. To what extent can you assemble a certain type of equipment that's necessary for the job? Okay, and these increasingly are things that they're looking for. And it's mentioned here in the context of psychology, because this is especially something that you may pick up with different research experiences. For some of us, that just never comes to play. We're just not there. But there are some, particularly if you're dealing with, for example, sensation and perception, physiological work, neuroscience work, where there may be specialized hardware techniques that you have. If you have those experiences, make sure that you are able to describe and present those experiences clearly to others, not just in the context of psychology, but in the context of working with hardware, okay, working with whatever equipment it is that you did. All right, Kevin, if you can go to the next slide. All right, before I move forward, let me pause for a moment and ask if there are any questions about the skills that I just reviewed. And I suppose the easiest thing is if you can just enter it in the chat and we can talk about it. All right, if there are no questions yet, maybe they'll come up. One of the ways to think about these skills is in terms of how you already are exposed to many of them as part of ongoing class assignments. So as one example on this slide, I've simply thrown out some of the things that you might be assigned in a class and how you might rethink what you're doing. Quite often when you think of a class assignment, you're just thinking, what's the professor asking me to do? What do I have to do to get an A? You know, how quickly can I get this project done before I can go on to something else? But what we're asking you to do is to take a step back and to think about the skills that you just reviewed on this handout and think about which ones might be relevant to these particular assignments. So whenever you conduct research, undoubtedly there are particular skills that are associated with that. How might you go about identifying what those skills are? Similarly, when you're assembling a paper, say a literature review or a full-on research report, what's the range of skills that are involved? And then finally, giving a class presentation. That's also an assignment. A lot of people often think about it, class presentations, as something that is utterly nerve-wracking. But in fact, there are some very important skills that are associated with that as well. Kevin, if you can go to the next slide. The critical thing that we want you to rethink in this format, when we think about these skill sets, is that don't just think about the things you're doing in school as assignments. Okay, obviously that consumes you enough, but recognize and appreciate that any course assignment also is a skill building opportunity for your future career. And for that reason, we're now going to turn to a number of ways that you can sort of grab the various things you are already doing or things you've done in the past, and also to frame it as things you think about for doing in the future, how you can capture these and assemble them to present them outside of a psychology context. Next slide, Kevin. Okay, so let's just take one example. You have a class assignment, which is one of these final papers that you have to write that's a research paper, and you actually have to conduct a full-on study. And what will appear on the syllabus, perhaps, okay, or on the assignment sheet, will be that, here are the things I, as your teacher, want you to do. I want you to develop a hypothesis. I want you to develop and describe the various measures and form of data collection that you're going to use. I want you to conduct a data analysis. I want you to give a presentation to the class at the end of the semester about your project, about how it turned out, and you're going to give a PowerPoint presentation. And then finally, you're going to write a paper, all right? And that's what you're already familiar with. That's the assignment that you're given. Next slide. Now, if we unpack each part of this, though, the reality is that there's a whole bunch of skills that you're actually using, and it's time you actually gave yourself credit, but not just give yourself credit, but actually think about ways to actually summarize after you've finished the project, to summarize what the experience was like in terms of the skills that you acquired. Beginning with, if we take the first step, the first thing that you do when you do any paper, which is do a literature review and develop the research goals and the hypotheses, there's a whole lot of cognitive skills that you are applying in that context. And along with that, there may be some social skills that you're applying as well. And this is especially true if you're working in a group project. Okay, next slide. With respect to methods and data collection, there's a reason why this is often the toughest, most intensive section to work on. It is the most technical, but it's also the most detail-oriented. And for that reason, often when you're developing the measures of a study, the actual operational definitions, and doing literature searches to find out, well, which version of self-confidence should I use in my study? All skill sets potentially can play a role, okay? And you may pick and choose which ones are most relevant to a particular project. But in fact, there's probably some of the cognitive ones that are going to be relevant, certainly in terms of communication, because you're talking about data collection. How are you going to present your measures to your participants? That's all about communication. Can you clearly write instructions to people? Or if you're going to be administering an oral procedure to people, speaking out loud what you want folks to do, how well can you clearly come up with a script that you want your research assistants to use so that they say it exactly the same way to every participant? Personal skills deals with kind of the interpersonal sensitivity that you might have. Well, actually, no, personal skills are going to deal with the degree to which you maintain your own integrity as you collect your data, okay? Are you adhering to the letter of what the procedure is? That's kind of the self-regulation component here. Are you following a timeline that you're supposed to follow according to your research plan? Social is where there could be a tremendous importance in how you deal with both your research partners, the other people in your research project, as well as with your research participants. The degree to which you express empathy, the degree to which you show this service orientation, where you are politely working with others. And then finally, the technological skills, particularly those involved with either any equipment that you use to collect data, as well as the programs like SPSS that you use to organize your data. All right, next slide, Kevin. Data analysis, this is very much going to be a matter of how well you can think through the data patterns that you find. So this is kind of the problem solving, the critical thinking part of it. Personal will deal with, just again, you're staying on schedule. To what extent can you follow a sort of a strict self-regulation strategy to make sure you get the data analysis done on time? And then finally, technological skills. Here again, you end up back at SPSS or whatever statistical analysis program you're working with. Next slide. Giving a presentation. Giving a presentation actually is a pretty intensive experience along with developing the measures for your study. There's a reason why oral presentations often are among the most uncomfortable experiences some people will have We all go through the experience of having butterflies in the stomach and being uncomfortable speaking in front of others. But part of what that's telling us is that there's a lot we're learning through that experience. And for that reason, there are elements of all 5 of the skill domains that come to play when you're giving a spoken presentation. There is, of course, the organizing of information that draws from your cognitive skills. Communication, it's a given. Being able to present things in a clear and easy to follow way is all important. Personal skills is especially important in how you use your own strengths, your own resources in putting the presentation together. Social skills will affect often how you are succeeding and how you can read the audience in determining how clearly your message is coming through. And then finally, the technological skills. In many cases, until it gets replaced, PowerPoint is one of the most common techniques used to present give a presentation, but it could also include exactly what's happening now. If you're giving a presentation online, how well you can not only use PowerPoint, but use the presentation software, be it Zoom or GoToMeeting or what have you, in order to successfully give a clear presentation. And again, these are all things that employers look at, and they would like to see specific examples of that you can describe. And so these are the things you'd want to try to capture. And then finally, Kevin, the next slide. The write-up of your paper is, again, drawing from your cognitive skills, clear communication, ability to write, and then the personal skills that, again, come into play in just helping you, frankly, get that paper in on time. You know, the self-regulation, the integrity, the honesty, drawing from references and appropriately giving credit where credit is due, those types of things. All right, next slide, Kevin. Okay, I wanted to also give an example in addition to what you're learning in classes, to also extracurricular experiences, because these play a tremendously important role. And in fact, increasingly, many employers are saying that they are not only interested in what you do in the classroom, but also how you apply your skills outside the classroom in various extracurricular experiences. And one of the ones that's very popular for a lot of psychology majors is doing a field placement or an internship. And this is where you might be working in a hospital or some type of specialty clinic or some other setting where basically you're working with clients. And so one of the first things to think about when you are engaging in these internships, and you want to sort of capture for someone who is completely unfamiliar with what an internship involves, okay, but might be interested in what skills you've acquired in that internship, just to break down what are some of the direct experiences that you have. And among the ones that we might consider are directly working with clients. Now, when you're an undergraduate, you will not be conducting therapy necessarily, but you could certainly be providing some type of assistance with that. So working with clients in some manner of speaking. In addition, helping to organize client records. So if you're working with a therapist or in a hospital clinic, part of what you may be asked to do is to actually take the various materials that are being used to record various interactions with clients and organize those records. And then finally, another thing you might be asked to do is to help with analyzing specific types of psychological tests of clients. Okay, so and that analysis, again, is an important experience, an important skill that you want to make sure you capture so that you can describe it in reasonable terms so that it's understandable and appreciated by a job placement that you might be interested in. Next slide, Kevin. Okay, so essentially with each of these items that experiences you might have in an internship, I'm simply throwing out some of the skills and the most specific skills from that list of 17 on the right side of the handout that might come into play in directly working with clients in some form. And of course, that's going to include things like critical and analytical thinking, okay, how you're thinking about the client and perhaps professionally analyzing what's going on with them. Oral communication, of course, how you can interact with them. Adaptability, this is your own personal adaptability to very flexible and potentially demanding situations, because there's some degree of unpredictability when working with others, and adaptability can be a very critical skill to have. Inclusivity, okay, this is the acceptance, the open-mindedness, the ability to work with individuals with from diverse backgrounds, and then finally this service orientation. Okay. All right, next slide. Helping organize client records. This is where the skills that you're really honing, you're really developing well when you're doing this in an internship, include information management, written communication, adaptability, and technological skills. Next slide. And then analyzing client tests. Here, you're going to again be returning to some of the clinical and analytical thinking. There may be some judgment and decision-making that's involved as you try to interpret the results of various tests. And then it's not unusual that certain types of tests are going to rely on certain coding systems or certain technological programs, software programs that you need to learn how to use in order to both code a test as well as to enter it into some type of records database system. Okay, next slide. All right, so one of the things that you can do when you sort of the take-home message from much of what we're talking about here is to think about the different courses that you've taken. Okay, and this is simply a sampling of the range of courses that a psychology department offers. And then think about what skills might be acquired in these courses. Okay, and in many of these, a lot of the cognitive skills that we've talked about might be touched on. Some of the personal skills may be touched on. Okay, and those two are what we especially specialize in, particularly in your standard lecture class in psychology. The other experiences, though, the other skills are what especially you want to pay particular mind to, and what courses might give an opportunity to work on them, beginning with social skills. Okay, social skills, really you only have an opportunity to develop them, number one, to the degree that you're learning about how people interact with each other. So you might pick some of that up in social psychology, maybe abnormal psychology, maybe personal adjustment, and certain other courses. But the actual hands-on practice of developing these social skills really is going to happen when you have an opportunity.
I'm not sure.
When you have the opportunity to work with others. And so one of the things that you can do is look for those class opportunities in which there's an opportunity to work with others, whether it's part of a team project, whether it's given some type of class presentation. Okay? Research methods often is one of the places where you're paired up or teamed up with other people. So to some people, they think of that and they think, oh, what a hassle. I have to put up with other people and different, different habits. And some people will put in a lot of effort and others won't. But that may be true, but it's also a real life experience of working with others. And it is something where you can develop the skills, sometimes more successfully, sometimes maybe not as successfully, at least the first time through, but recognize it as that opportunity to refine those skills when working with others. Okay, and that's the social skills. With respect to communication, communication is all the places where you are writing papers. Of course, that's an opportunity to develop your written communication, but oral communication, those are the few classes that you may take where you actually have to stand in front of your classmates and actually present. But again, that is developing a skill. I see a question. Do I have comments about how students can think about skills with being a research assistant in a faculty lab? Absolutely. When you're a research assistant in a faculty lab, you're going to be a lot of the social skills, because one of the things you find when you're working in a faculty lab, you're working with other people with very different temperaments, with different personalities, with different scheduling habits, and you have to adapt. So there are a number of the skills that are on this handout. Adaptability being critical, probably integrity to make sure you're doing things the appropriate way, but maybe you're also noticing whether others are doing something appropriate or inappropriate, and maybe you need to respond to that. But these are things that, appreciate in yourself, that these are where you can develop these skills. Other examples of skills you might pull up in a research lab. I mean, there is, of course, I see in the following comment about judgment and decision making, and analytical thinking, examples of what these skills could be. A lot of this could be describing specific situations in which you worked and how those skills came into play. So you might mention, for example, in working in a research lab, that you worked with a wide variety of different types of individuals, not only as participants, but also as research mates in the lab, okay? And how there were different backgrounds, some people may say, some employers may actually say, give us an example of a situation in which you faced a particular type of challenge. And a research lab is exactly the type of place where you might want to describe certain types of issues that came up. If there was a problem with the data that were collected, how was that problem solved? Was it a problem of the way the research assistants were perhaps not all equally paying attention to what the instructions were for collecting the data? So it's digging down to specific examples. One of the things that you want to avoid when you're applying for jobs, and by the way, and I know I'm going to run short on time, so let me jump to this. When you get letters of recommendation, one of the most important things you want to be able to do is to provide specific examples of things that happened, okay, and that taught you something valuable in the various experiences that you have. And the more specific you can be, the more instructive, the more useful it will be, not only in illustrating better what you learned, but number two, in making you stand out from others who may have had similar experiences. One of the worst things that can happen when you apply for a job or get a letter of recommendation is that essentially what you submit, it boils down to a simple list of adjectives. Okay, they're thrifty, conscientious, honest, ethical. That's all good stuff. But in the abstract, it doesn't weigh as heavily as having specific examples. Okay. Final comment I see is related to psychology. What kind of software and hardware can we put on a resume? I would generally say if you can mention the specific programs that you used, and this is something many people are already doing. Essentially, I'm familiar with SPSS. Many people are using a statistics program called R. So mentioning the specific ones that you're using, that can be very helpful, all right? And the software really is pretty cut and dry. Just here are the programs that I've used. Where people sometimes don't think to emphasize their expertise and skills relates to the hardware. If there were particular types of machines, or particularly certain types of setups, complex setups that you used in a lab, those would be things you could mention as well. Kevin, if you could jump to the next slide. Okay, where I wanted to end is giving you some steps, and these slides are going to be available after this talk ends so you can review them. But one of the things that's most useful for you to sort of assemble step by step the specific experiences that may relate to these skills is every semester, and maybe even every few weeks if you wish, but every semester at the very least, take stock of what your skills are and write down specific examples of those skills. And do it every semester, because at the time you graduate, or even years down the road where you're trying to summon up specific examples of what you did in the past, a lot of things are just gonna become a blur if you don't write them down as soon as they happen, or at least within the semester, so that there are specific examples you can draw from. And so what we advise is that you at least try to break them down in the 5 skill set domains, but you can certainly be even more specific than that by using each of the 17, or at least whichever of the 17 more specific skills again, on the right side of the handout, that apply to the courses, the extracurricular experiences, and anything else that may have happened during the semester that you feel provides a productive and positive reflection of skills that you acquired during the semester. So you have the 5 different domains that are listed on on every slide I'm going to present. But one of the first things you can do is this kind of review, this expertise, the review of expertise in skill sets that you have semester by semester. Okay, and this goes towards what we call the development of a skill set portfolio. Increasingly, students are being given the opportunity to create what are called e-portfolios, which simply means an online portfolio that highlights what you consider presents your best foot forward, makes you look positive with various examples of things that you've done. Well, here we're suggesting a part of that could be this skill set portfolio. Next slide, Kevin. In addition to the skill set portfolio, well, okay, so as you develop it, here, one way that you might put the skill set portfolio together is go through systematically with all of the courses that you took, and course by course, identify what skills came from that course. Now, I'm going to tell you that for the example here, I put down psychology courses, but there is no reason whatsoever you can't be drawing from all of your courses, not just psychology. What are the experiences you got? So maybe it wasn't in a psych class where you got a lot of social skill development. Maybe there were film production courses you took, or studio art classes that you took, where there was a lot more social interaction and social problem solving going on, and mention those in this type of skill set portfolio as well. Next slide. Okay, in addition to the skill set portfolio that you're doing semester by semester, periodically take stock, and especially if you're just doing this now, you're going to be playing catch up. So you might want to think about the courses you've taken in the past and try to sum it up as best as you can recollect, at any point in time. What are specific experiences, specific illustrations that highlight the skills that you developed across the different domains? Next slide. It also is going to be very useful, since you have this handout and it's kind of helping to fill in the range of skills that employers may be looking for. After you have done your skill set portfolio for a couple of semesters, look over them. Think about the skills that are represented there, but then also look and see what skills are not represented there. And again, for many people, it's often the kind of social skills that in particular don't get a lot of attention, or maybe it's oral communication. You've written tons of papers, but you've given very few presentations in classes. So how might you better address that, if not in a class, at least through extracurricular experiences? Next step. Next slide, Kevin. Okay, when you are applying for jobs, one of the things that's suggested that you do is to go through your resume, look at the range of skills that you put on your resume, compare them with the range of skills that are in the job posting that you're applying for, okay? Because that matchup of skill sets is all important. You want to see the degree to which, keep in mind, whoever's reading your resume, they're the one who wrote the job posting probably, and they're going to be looking to see to what extent do you sort of check the boxes of the particular qualities they're looking for. Next slide. Okay, the same type of thing can be done, assessment can be done with your cover letter. Okay, so when you write a cover letter, to what extent does that cover letter emphasize the various skills that either a job, or for this matter, a grad school may be looking for? And then the final box, next slide, Kevin, is your letters of recommendation. One of the things, if you know the job or the grad program you're applying to, think about carefully the skills that they're likely looking for, and highlight for your letter writer which of those skills you would ideally like them to emphasize. And maybe you can't even say it in terms of skills, but you can at least say, mention the experiences you had, and ask them to refer to those experiences and to discuss those and the value of those in the letters that they write. Okay, that way you have a letter of recommendation that has a much stronger punch, a much stronger impact, because it touches on the things that either the employer or a grad program is looking for. Next slide. Okay, I got through it with, as near as I can tell, 1 minute to spare. I am sorry the presentation took so long, but if there are questions, I am more than happy to take them. If folks would care to speak up, or you can do it through chat. Okay, a lot of stuff that was covered. The best thing I can say is use the handout to just review, match it up with the experiences that you've had. And you know, if you have questions, feel free to write me. My email address is going to be made available from SciChi, I'm sure. And thank you all very much.